We do apologize for that slight technical hitch. Now, as I was saying, we are getting into our next conversation, and today we are talking about fossil fuels and threats to marine life, specifically along the ocean corridor. And with me in studio is the National Network Coordinator, Kenya Oil and Gas Working Group. His name is Muturi Kamau. Muturi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you here this morning. And before we get deep into the conversation, just why is it important for us to particularly speak about this right now? Why is it relevant for us to speak about this right now?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think first and foremost it is important to look at the trends. Over the last, we could say, 2 or 3 decades. While a lot of the countries situated in what a lot of people tend to refer to as the global north have predominantly relied on fossil fuel energy as a source of energy for different industries, sectors and spaces, and to advance the economies. We have gotten to a point where there is the realization that emissions from fossil fuel development has come with its own negative implications. Key or the center of it being that there has been the realization that we need to cap the global temperatures at 1.5 degrees. And that's why a lot of jurisdictions have taken up commitments under the Paris Agreement to ensure that through their nationally determined contributions, that is something that happens. Secondly, another thing that has consistently happened, again, has been looking at how the transition can happen. It's taken over 100 years to get to where we are with fossil fuel development. And right now, looking at all these factors in play, it's now important to look at how we can exploit renewables for advancing some of these industries and advancing economies. And Africa sits at the heart of it. Kenya, for instance, relies to a huge extent, approximately 90%, from renewable energies, and you're looking at geothermal, wind, and solar. So there is immense potential, but it will have to be gradual. Looking at the 2 dimensions at national level and at grassroots level. From where we sit, one of the bigger conversations that we've been having with communities have been how is this transition going to look like? Taking into consideration that a lot of communities rely on firewood as a source of fuel, for instance. So how can a sustainable energy and just energy transition look like for some of these communities? And I like the fact that there are so many inventions and innovations that have come forward to ensure that if it's addressing issues around clean water, clean and safe water, solar is being pursued as one of the options, and so on and so forth. So it has come as a result of where we are right now, and the projections towards the future, and considering that it does not look too bleak, how can we have that gradual transition away from fossil fuels?
Yeah, yes. And just to pick on that, the transition has been ongoing, and it's a global transition, to ensure that we are transitioning to renewable energy. But if you can touch on the alternatives that we have, you've already mentioned solar power. So what are the alternatives?
So first and foremost, I think just to take you back, we need to appreciate where fossil fuels have brought us, and the fact that and I'll look at oil as one of the components. I mean, a lot of us rely on diesel and petrol to get us from point A to point B. Some industries rely on diesel-powered generators and the likes. So it's been able to revolutionize how we've been able to do things. But if you look at where we are right now, for instance, I have seen an increased number of companies that have come in with, say, for instance, e-mobility. You're looking at the increase in buses that are plying Nairobi routes that are using the lithium batteries, rechargeable lithium batteries. You're looking at boda bodas that are now relying on rechargeable batteries or the battery swap system. You're looking at tuk-tuks that are using solar panels to recharge batteries. So that transition is actually going forth. And I think for Kenya, we need to appreciate the fact that the policy architecture has slowly been shifting. We are seeing efforts directed towards ensuring that even as we are looking at expanding our fossil fuel investment, there is still measures that are being taken to do that. And so at the end of the day, I honestly believe that it needs to look at, it needs to have a multidimensional and multi-sectoral approach to it, because transportation is just one bit of it. You have the clean cooking options. You have the jikokoas that of course are looking at energy efficiency and all that. Organization, for instance, has a very innovative technology called Solwaten that we distribute to communities, and it uses solar to purify water. So it looks at, we need to look at the different sectors and then also see how we can support this particular transition. Again, the other thing that has to happen is, how do stakeholders come together to ensure that there is a lot of investment in research and development? Because at the end of the day, we need to be in a situation where research can define a lot of the options that we have. Because if you look at the dependency on oil and gas, for instance, the byproducts that we get from petrochemicals are immense. From cosmetics, from pharmaceutical products, from transportation. So it's not an easy space that will just be able to say we are shutting down the use of fossil fuels and making the transition. We have to look at, say, for instance, pharmaceuticals. What are some of the byproducts that come from fossil fuels, and how can we then put in investment into research and development to look at the alternatives that can actually replace whatever is being used. So that is just an example, but a lot needs to happen, and that's why I think a lot of countries are now looking at how, in terms of the transition, it's not just about the energy component of it, but all these other factors that come into play. Yes.
Is it achievable in the near future for Kenya?
Well, near future is relative. Near future is relative because it all depends on the priorities that we have as a country. And at the same time, looking at one, what are some of the partnerships that we can actually enter into? Because if you're able to look at partnerships with other countries that have advanced some of these areas, then it is relatively going to be easy for us to sort of build synergies in supporting the development and as well as piloting of some of these technologies that we are looking at. So near future, unless we actually actively put in efforts, because the governance framework is just part of it. You need to align with the policies and the institutions to understand that this has to happen. But at the same time, you have programs such as the Kenya Off-Grid Solar Access Program run by the World Bank. And it's one that has been there, trying to support some of the most marginalized communities access electricity by setting up solar mini-grids as part of it. So again, access to energy vis-a-vis looking at all these other components that allow us to rely on fossil fuel byproducts and seeing what are some of the things that we can actually run with. But I am optimistic that in the next 20 to 30 years, we might be able to record some significant changes.
Some changes on that. Maybe what is standing in our way? What is standing in our way to getting to a point where we have fully transitioned to renewable energy?
Yeah, so the first thing is we need to look at our priorities. As it is, for instance, I know that there is an interest to open up areas for oil and gas exploration in the country. There has been the reconstitution of blocks, and there's a lot of interest in especially looking at investment offshore. So that might, while we are talking about having a just transition as a country, that might also be a limiting factor, because at the end of the day it feels like we've not decided where we want to be. So how about then thinking about investing more in the transition and looking at safeguarding some of these areas? Another thing I think would be looking at not just the policy architecture, but now diving deep into the institutions. Do we have adequate institutions and the human resource capacity that understands the importance of this particular transition process? Third, I think, and I had mentioned, is the partnership element and the linkages. There are so many countries that we can actually benchmark on. And not just that, looking at if we are going to support the exploration and development process, how can we then utilize revenues that are coming from that to inject into renewable energy development? So there are quite a number of angles to it, but it needs deliberate effort to ensure that we are put in a place that ensures that we're actually working towards that by setting targets. And for instance, I think perhaps just to talk a bit about the Oceans Conference that took place last month. One of the key things that particular convening was trying to address was the 30 by 30. So protecting 30% of the oceans by 2030. So you see that essentially gives us a timeline, and considering that we have 4 years, are we going to have recorded that we've been able to safeguard at least 30%? So there's a lot that needs to happen. And at the same time, I think one of the things that we're looking at is not just working in isolation. Right now, we are strategically placed in the region. We are considered as the leaders in renewable energy investment. So it's to see how we can leverage on the region and the linkages that we can also develop with the different jurisdictions from West Africa and South Africa and other areas to ensure that we are strategically placed for this year.
All right. And now I want us to get back to marine life, specifically along the ocean corridor. Why is the ocean health important? Yeah,
that's a very good question. So if you look at the Kenyan coastline, for instance, it's estimated to be about 600 kilometers from Lamu to Kwale. And it is very rich in biodiversity. You look at the different mangrove species that we have, and a lot of the different species are actually concentrated in Lamu, from the Mkoko to Mchu to Mkanda and the likes. So we have a very wide variety. And these mangroves play a number of different roles. So one, they are very crucial areas for breeding grounds for different marine species. Two, they play a vital role in breaking down the waves that come from the ocean. So if we did not have mangroves, for instance, the likelihood of experiencing tsunamis and all that would actually be considered at a greater risk. We have endangered species such as the dugong. We have the marine protected areas, including Kiwayu, Kisitempunguti, and the likes. So there's quite a bit. And from a report that we did a few months ago with a US organization called Earth Insight and ourselves, as well as different, we're looking at offshore risks to marine species across quite a number of countries: Australia, Tanzania, Mexico, and the like. There were about 8 countries. And we noted that about 85% of offshore concessions as of 2024 were actually offshore, were in the marine environment. So these are places that, of course, are now, while they have a lot of sensitivity, they are at a greater risk because, one, if you now come back to Kenya and if you're looking at, say, loading and offloading of crude oil, there are risks of spills. And if there's that spillage, essentially then it will have an implication on the mangrove species and the different species. We saw a classic example is a few years ago with Mauritius oil spill. And we saw a lot of, in fact, a lot of the communities that live along the coast were able to record reduced fish catch from tuna and all these other species because of that spillage. So the oceans are not just a source of livelihood for communities. It is an entire ecosystem that revolves around people as well as the marine species themselves. And that's why even as in the report itself, we were trying to advocate against opening up additional areas because the risks offshore are greater than risks on the terrestrial side. If you're drilling here, for instance, the risks from spillage and all these things, you can actually control them better as opposed to having them offshore. So those are some of the things that I believe that we need to take into consideration, and that's why we are calling for different stakeholders to reassess, and especially government, to just relook the interest offshore and try and see what are some of the sensitivities along the Kenyan coast, because 100% of the offshore blocks overlap these key sensitive areas. Yes.
Yeah. And with that, could you also just maybe point out on the threats that these fossil fuels tend to pose?
Yeah. So when you're looking at the award of a concession license, for instance, if it's offshore, a number of things happen once agreements have been entered into and investment decisions have been made. So you'll get investors putting together resources, and the most initial step is normally to get data to understand the area that you're looking at. So how they do this is that they use seismic boats during the seismic survey process that pull long lines of what we call hydrophones. And these hydrophones use loud bangs to generate sort of a noise that will give them a projection of an image to just understand the geology. So studies have shown that some of these noises have been detrimental to marine species, affecting their auditory systems. And then the other thing, and this we've also received from the fisher for communities that we've engaged, is that it has also been a risk to the fishing grounds, what they call IMBO. They've also been affected by these seismic activities. And beyond the seismic activities, once the decision has been made to undertake the drilling process, there is also the risk that even as you're drilling, there's the drilling mud. So at times there's risk of releasing this mud into the ocean, which at times, or most often when drilling, there are the chemicals that are used to that are mixed in order to ensure that there's a seamless drilling process. So those chemicals, of course, are by and large are normally toxic to the environment, and might pose disastrous implications, because if you have fish that has interacted, say, with an environment that has been exposed to, say, heavy metals such as lead, and you consume that fish, then essentially you're at a higher risk of getting effects of carcinogenic compounds. So, I mean, looking at the different stages, you can actually determine what risk can actually be posed to what factors.
Yeah. And from that, what you're saying is some of these risks or some of the impacts may not be felt immediately, or may not be visible immediately, but have a ripple effect in the long run.
Correct.
Altogether.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's why while undertaking the environmental and social impact assessments, it is very important to identify the baseline conditions, the ecological baseline conditions for an area, and then secondly, to ensure that at the end of the day, there are mitigation measures put in place to ensure that any effects that may arise as a result of the work being undertaken can be addressed in a timely manner to ensure that the effects are not as severe as would be expected. Yes.
Would you at the moment say that our marine ecosystem is declining, and maybe what does that mean for our blue economy?
Yes. So Kenya as a country has been really keen on matters blue economy. And part of the blue economy strategy is looking at the exploitation, not just of marine species, but also looking at development of or exploration and exploitation of fossil fuels. Simply because if you're looking at the Somali, Kenya, Tanzania belt, for Tanzania, they have been lucky enough to tap into LNG. And for Somalia, just recently, they discovered quite a huge significant amount of oil reserves. So there's a lot of potential for Kenya. But at the same time, we also need to really consider how that is supposed to happen. I know there's a strategy in place, but at the end of the day is to map out the sensitivities, because those sensitive areas are the ones that are going to determine how we go about it. And one thing that I always say is we should not prioritize one sector over another, because at the end of the day, if you're looking at this tourism sector, which pulls in a considerable amount of stakeholders from across the globe, and the amount of revenue it generates. So if you are having, if you're going to, say for instance, identify hydrocarbon reserves in a marine protected area such as Kisite Mpunguti, then essentially it means you'll now need to probably consider how to extract against having tourists come to appreciate the beauty and all these things that are given by that area. So as an example, that's one of the things that really needs to come into consideration. But again, considering the length and extent of the offshore blocks, one of the things that we perhaps can consider is not really focusing on the places that are close to the shores, but doing everything else a couple 100 kilometers off the coastline, so at least it creates sort of a buffer zone where at the end of the day communities as well as this marine ecosystem that they rely on is not affected. Yes.
All right, as we wind up on our conversation, maybe what is being done currently to ensure that we are avoiding all these threats that you've mentioned?
Wow, yeah, so there's a lot of discussion that is happening. I know that through KEMSFED there is the Marine Spatial Plan conversations that are happening. There are regulations by the different agencies that are involved in ensuring that we strengthen not just our fishery sector, but also looking at our energy sector as well as our upstream petroleum sector. There's a lot of multi-stakeholder dialogue that's happening, both at national level and at county level. But at the end of the day is to ensure that these risks are mapped out as early as possible, and sufficient measures are put in place to ensure that there is adequate consideration to ensure that we do not end up losing a lot of the marine ecosystem to prioritizing fossil fuel development, for instance, because at the end of the day we'll end up losing one, and it's while we can create a balance, the balance should be at the end of the day we are looking at transition that can at the same time address the energy concerns that we have, but also ensuring that we put in place certain protections that can allow us to continue and enjoying the environment that has been God given to us. Yeah. Yeah.
So just as ordinary Kenyans, and this is specifically maybe to the people living along the coastline, yeah, what would be what are they supposed to do? How do they come on board in helping with all this?
Yeah, so first and foremost is looking at the processes that happen at county level. Counties now have the mandate to develop their own policies. I remember back in 2018, we were supporting Lamu County government to develop the energy policy. And so there are all these other organizations that are coming together to work together with county governments. And in so doing, channels of communication and consultation with some of these stakeholders who might be most affected need to be put at the center of these conversations. There's a lot that also goes around heritage, culture and heritage, because it's not just about the livelihood aspect, but also what essentially can be appreciated from a culture and heritage perspective. Third and most importantly is to ensure that at the end of the day, the communities who would by and large be affected by some of these processes at the table, because if this does not happen, then there's a high likelihood, and we've seen it happening. A lot of communities are now realizing that while projects are being brought to the ground, they without consultation, they come up and stand up to agitate as a collective voice. And we have seen in Lamu, for instance, with the proposed coal plant. We have seen in Kilifi with the proposed nuclear plant. We have seen in all these other areas. So there's a growing shift where communities are now understanding and appreciating the importance of collective voice and collective action, and they want to be involved, so that at least when they say that they give information and say that the proposed area where you want to set up a project is going to have monumental effects on our culture and heritage, then that needs to be factored. If there's a way that can be navigated, then that can take place. But of course, having the voice of the communities at the heart of it.
Yeah. And finally, are you hopeful that we can reverse the damage that has been made this far?
Well, I am optimistic, but it will take a lot of effort. It will need strategic interventions, and at the end of the day, government, private sector, and communities need to work together and agree on certain measures that can actually allow for reversal of these effects.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'll take your final remarks.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we just need to, not just collectively, but also individually, we all have a role to play to ensuring that we safeguard our marine and terrestrial environments. And it's as simple as, recycling. It's as simple as understanding that you should not litter. There are some of the things that have been pushed and have been forced. I remember there's a time when guys used to be arrested in town for littering, and right now you cannot see that happening. So I think that mindset shift needs to happen now, so that at least at the end of the day we are able to move collectively as one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
This is where we end this conversation with Muturi Kamau. But don't you go